The point man stopped because the thing hanging over the trail did not belong there. It was the kind of object American troops were specifically taught to recognize before they ever reached Vietnam. A heavy, spiked swinging trap suspended above a path. If the man in front saw it soon enough, the file stopped with him. If he did not, the patrol had already lost its best chance to deal with the problem before it became something worse. That is why the point man matters in this story. Not because he was supposed to be fearless. Not because he had some magical sixth sense. He was the first set of eyes on a piece of ground everybody else was about to use. And once something obviously man-made showed up over the trail, the whole job changed. The patrol was no longer simply moving from one place to another. Now the men had to decide whether the trail itself had been prepared for them. That question was bigger than the object in front of the point man. In April 1969, Marines training at Camp Geiger in North Carolina were taken through a course known as Terror Lane. A Marine Corps newspaper described the trail as a place where trainees were shown common Viet Cong booby traps before they went overseas. The devices were left exposed for training, so the Marines could understand what they were looking at. One of them was identified by name, the swinging mace. That matters because it tells us the thing was not just a later museum curiosity or a story that grew after the war. Marines were being shown the device while the war was still being fought. But the real lesson on a patrol was not the name. It was recognition. A man walking point could not spend every step trying to remember a catalog of traps. He had to read the trail as a whole. David Michalak, who walked point with D Company, 1st Battalion, 5th Cavalry, described learning to notice subtle disturbances in the earth along trails. His job forced him to pay attention to changes that another man, 10 or 20 yards back, might never see. That is the difference between walking through jungle and walking point through jungle. The file behind you can watch you. You have to watch what has not happened yet. A clean trail might mean nothing, or it might mean somebody had been there. A branch that sat strangely, a place where the ground had been disturbed, vegetation that did not match what was around it, a line that looked too deliberate. None of those things automatically meant danger, but they could make the point man slow down. And when he slowed down, the patrol changed speed with him. Henry "Hank" Hughes remembered becoming a point man after arriving in Vietnam in 1968. His oral history describes the job as something learned in the field with help from men who had already been there. The title of that interview says a lot in very few words. Take it as slow as you want. That was not a luxury. The man on point was giving the rest of the patrol time. Time to stop before entering a bad piece of ground. Time to see him signal. Time to keep the next man from walking into the same problem. And there is a practical difference between slowing a patrol and stopping one. A slowdown can pass backward through the file almost naturally. The man behind closes his pace. The next man sees it. Everybody feels the rhythm change. A full stop is different. Now the men who cannot see the point man have to trust information moving back through people, not through the trail itself. One man may be looking ahead. Another is checking the side of the trail. Somebody farther back may know only that the file has frozen and that the reason is still somewhere out front. That delay in understanding is part of the job. The front of the patrol learns first. The rest of the patrol catches up one man at a time. Spacing varied by unit, terrain, visibility, and what a leader wanted that day. There was no single Vietnam patrol formation that every veteran would recognize as his own. But the basic logic is easy to understand. If the men were packed together, one problem could become everybody's problem very quickly. So imagine what changes when the point man finds something as obvious as a swinging mace. Before that moment, the patrol has one direction: forward. After that moment, forward is no longer automatic. The man behind the point man needs to know why he stopped. The signal goes back. Men who cannot see the object yet still have to stop because the man in front has seen something they have not. That is one of the strange things about a jungle column. A man 20 or 30 places back can have his whole day changed by something completely hidden from him. He does not need to see the trap first. He needs to trust the stop. And while some eyes are now on what is hanging over the trail, other eyes have a different job. The ground beside the trail matters. The brush beside the ground matters. The trees matter. The easiest looking way around the obstacle suddenly deserves more suspicion, not less. That does not mean every man starts searching in the same direction or following one fixed drill. Veterans are very clear about how much these things varied. Terrain, unit habits, experience, leadership, and the exact shape of the trail all mattered. But the discovery itself changes the question. A few seconds earlier, the problem was, can we move through here? Now the problem becomes, what else about this place has been arranged? That is not paranoia. It is new information. A visible device tells the patrol that at least one piece of the landscape is not accidental. And once that is true, the shoulders of the trail become part of the problem. The overhead vegetation becomes part of the problem. The obvious bypass becomes part of the problem. A trail that had been narrow but usable can suddenly feel much narrower because the men no longer trust the easy choices. That is not because every trap had another trap beside it. The record does not support turning every discovery into a perfect enemy puzzle. It is because once a patrol has proof that somebody deliberately prepared that piece of terrain, the assumption of an ordinary trail is gone. The men have learned something. Somebody expected movement there. That is the real turn in this episode. The swinging mace is visible. The intention behind it is not. Was the device alone? Was the trail being watched? Was the obstacle meant to slow movement through one narrow place? Was the easiest bypass still usable? Those are practical questions, and they are exactly the kind that can turn a halted file into a much slower piece of work. There is a photograph from the war era of a weighted spiked ball, identified as a Viet Cong booby trap at Cu Chi. There is the Marine Corps training reference from 1969. There are later historical descriptions of the same general device. The object existed. The training existed. The patrol problem existed. What I have not found is a reliable named combat account that lets me tell you, Private so-and-so found this exact swinging mace on this exact trail on this exact date. That missing piece matters. So I am not going to give this patrol a fake name, fake grid coordinate, or fake after-action report. The better story is what the documented object did to the job of a point man. Because the moment he recognized it, the trap had already failed at one thing. It had failed to remain part of the jungle. Now it was an object, and objects can be pointed out. The danger around them is harder. Tom Brooks, writing about Walking Point with the 199th Infantry Brigade, remembered the new man being put out front and expected to become the eyes and ears of the patrol. That phrase shows up again and again in veterans' accounts because it is accurate without being fancy. Eyes and ears. Not mine detector, not engineer, not fortune teller. The first man, the man who had to notice when the trail changed. And if he found something visible, his job did not end with recognition. Now his location mattered. He was still the closest man to the problem. The men behind him still needed his information. The patrol leader still had to decide what to do with a route that had just become questionable. That is where a visible trap can be more disruptive than the word visible makes it sound. Seeing it early is the good outcome, but seeing it does not hand the patrol a clean answer. It only prevents the worst answer from happening immediately. For veterans who actually did this work, I want to ask one specific question here. When a visible booby trap stopped your patrol, what changed first behind the point man? Did the spacing open up? Did everyone simply freeze where they were? Did the platoon leader move forward? Did one man watch the ground while somebody else watched the brush? And how different was that from unit to unit? That is the kind of detail I would rather hear from somebody who did it than pretend there was one universal answer. Because this is where broad Vietnam history usually moves too fast. It says, the patrol found a booby trap, and then the story jumps to the next event. But the finding was the event. A file that had been moving is now stationary. Men behind the point man may not know what he found. The leader has to make a route decision. And the route decision is not only about distance. A bypass can cost time. A wider swing around the obstacle can break visual contact between men if the vegetation is thick enough. A route that looks safer can push the patrol into ground nobody has read yet. Staying on the trail may be unacceptable. Leaving the trail may create a different problem. So, the decision is not trap or no trap. The decision is which uncertainty the patrol is willing to accept. That is a more useful way to picture the halt. Nobody needs to shout. Nobody needs to make a speech. The patrol simply stops being automatic. Every next move has to be chosen again. The trail has lost its innocence, if you want to put it plainly. Even after the patrol gets around the obstacle, it does not get the old trail back. The next 100 yards are not mentally the same 100 yards they would have been 5 minutes earlier. Now the men know the route has been prepared. The point man's attention changes. The men immediately behind him watch his pace more closely. A harmless vine can cost time because it has to be looked at. A narrow place that would have been crossed without much thought may stop the file again. The patrol may choose different ground, even if the new route is slower. And this is where the swinging mace almost disappears from the story. That is exactly where it should disappear. A trap like that was not important because it looked medieval or strange. It was important because of what it could make a modern infantry patrol do. Stop, reassess, change direction, lose time, treat the next piece of jungle differently. That consequence is more interesting than the object itself. The men at Camp Geiger in 1969 were shown exposed examples because exposed examples could be studied. Vietnam did not offer that courtesy. The Marine Corps article about Terror Lane made the contrast clear. The training devices were visible so the men could learn them, while the real ones would be concealed. That meant the point man had to take a classroom recognition problem and turn it into a field habit. Look at the trail. Look above it. Look at what has been moved. Look at what should not be there. And then, just as important, know when to stop. Michaelak's recollection of subtle disturbances in the earth gets at this better than any dramatic description can. The point man's success was usually boring. Nothing happened. The file moved. The radio stayed quiet. Nobody needed help. No helicopter had to be called. No report was written about the branch he noticed and avoided. That is why the men who were good at point often live more clearly in the memories of the soldiers behind them than they do in official paperwork. Their work showed up as absence. An ambush that did not happen. A wire that was not touched. A bad trail that was not taken. A column that stopped before the rest of the men knew why. And that brings us back to the swinging mace. The important second was not when it moved. It was when the point man saw enough to keep it from deciding what happened next. After that, the patrol still had work to do. It had to communicate the stop. It had to read the surrounding ground. It had to decide whether the route remained usable. It had to move again, without pretending the warning had meant nothing. And when movement resumed, the patrol was not returning to the same rhythm. A man who had been watching the point man might now be watching the vegetation above him. Another might be paying more attention to the edge of the trail. The pace can recover without the confidence recovering with it. That distinction matters. You can move and still distrust the ground. You can keep the mission going and still know the conditions have changed. That is what a visible trap can do, even when nobody is hit. If you served with a point man who had a habit the rest of the platoon trusted, a way he stopped, a hand signal, a pace, a thing he always checked, Put the unit and the detail in the comments if you are comfortable doing that. And if these are the Vietnam stories you want us to keep building, the small jobs and decisions that rarely make the big documentaries, subscribe. That tells me to keep digging for the men, the practices, and the records behind them, instead of turning every episode into another general history of the war. The swinging mace was the object the patrol could see. The change came after they saw it. The trail ahead was no longer just difficult ground. It was ground somebody had prepared. And from that point on, the man in front had a different job than he had a few seconds earlier.